Chapter 23, Convenient Agreement. I began studying hard, in part to impress Rosie, and soon my grades were respectable. But I still hung around with the Spanish lords and the Latin kings. Getting high became a bigger and bigger part of my life. The unknowns showed up at Maria's apartment wanting to talk about the incident with Speedy. I agreed to go by their hood and get the problem settled. After they left the house, I headed to Kedzie and Armitage looking for Lalo. I wanted Lalo to tell the unknowns that I was a member of the Latin Kings, as he had said he would. I found Lalo standing on the corner with Morena and some other members of the Kings and Queens. I told Lalo about the unknowns and he agreed to go with me. We left Kedzie and Armitage in Lalo's car. Morena came along. We stopped at Maplewood Park and got high for a little while before we left. I had been kind of scared about fighting Speedy. Well, not so much fighting him. I was really scared I would get my ass whipped. He was older and slightly bigger than me, which made me nervous. But after a couple of joints and several beers, I was ready to go. When we got to the unknowns' hood on Levitt and Schiller Streets, they were out there waiting. They saw me and started teasing me about how they thought they would have to come looking for me. This king brother ain't no punk, Lalo defended me. Speedy popped up out of nowhere and started talking shit about me not belonging to the Kings, but he was quickly told to shut up by his leader. The leader of the unknowns was called JJ. He was a big, stocky guy with blonde hair and blue eyes. Those who didn't know him swore that JJ was a white boy, but he was actually Puerto Rican. JJ informed Speedy that Lalo was a well-known king, therefore his word was to be respected. Lalo and JJ stood there complimenting each other and the relationship between their respective gangs. Apparently, the unknowns were started by the Kings in order to direct some of the heat the police were putting on them elsewhere. That move made it easier for the Kings to continue their drug selling business. The letters UK stood for Undercover Kings, or as they called themselves, Unknowns. After what seemed like an eternity of ass kissing, we went inside the Unknowns' clubhouse and got ready to settle the conflict between Speedy and me. Speedy told his version of the fight between us. He didn't mention that he had teased me until I snapped. I looked around the room and noticed that everyone there except JJ, Lalo, and myself had sarcastic grins on their faces. I guess they found the fact that we were fighting over a girl funny. Meanwhile, I couldn't sit still. I would sit down and then stand back up and walk around the room, never taking my eyes off Speedy. Speedy kept elaborating on his argument that I was angry because Jenny left me for him. Finally, it was my turn to talk. I began by admitting being angry about Speedy having sex with Jenny, but also pointed out that the reason I snapped was because of the teasing. Chuckles and giggles were heard throughout the room when I said that. Only JJ looked around seriously and stopped the unknowns from busting out in laughter. I took a step towards Speedy and said, "Punk, don't be using my name to get pussy." JJ stepped between us. JJ and Lalo warned us about going at each other before a decision was made, and then left the room to make a decision. When they were gone, everybody was quiet. I lit up a joint and sat on the floor by myself on one side of the room, while Speedy and the rest of the unknowns looked at me from the other side. It seemed like something very serious was about to happen. I felt like an outsider being left to relax before I was victimized. My only hope was Lalo. JJ and Lalo came back and instructed Speedy and me to stand up in the middle of the room. JJ preached that it was a shame that we let a girl break up our friendship. He continued talking about how the relationship between the unknowns and the Kings had always been a good one. Therefore, it was decided that the problem should remain only between the two of us. "If you two want to hurt each other over a bitch, so be it," JJ declared. If we wanted it, a one-on-one fight was to take place between Speedy and me. Regardless of who won, we were to let the argument end there. I quickly agreed with their decision, so did Speedy. We decided to fight. We went out the back door of the clubhouse, which led into the alley. Outside, a circle was formed around us and we went at it. Speedy had the reputation of being a good fighter, so I was pretty scared. However, the fear of getting a reputation as a punk took over me and I attacked him. It turned out Speedy wasn't much of a fighter after all. The first punch I threw landed right on his nose. He put his hands over it and noticed the blood gushing out. While he was busy nursing his nose, I hit him a few more times in the face. Speedy went into a rage. Tears began flowing out of his eyes in buckets and he began yelling, "I'll kill you, I'll kill you." One of the unknowns standing close to Speedy had a baseball bat. Speedy snatched the bat and charged me. He swung wildly and hit me above my left eye. JJ ordered him to drop the bat. When he didn't, the other unknowns stopped him. The unknowns charged Speedy, held him, and took the bat away from him. JJ then told his boys that Speedy had acted like a pussy. He grabbed Speedy by the neck, told him he was no longer an unknown, and then ordered his boys to whip Speedy's ass. Speedy had opened a big gash above my eye, and I was bleeding like crazy. The left side of my face and neck were completely covered with blood. Yet, as bad as the cut was, it was nothing compared to the beating Speedy was getting. There was at least 10 guys beating him with no mercy. The guys who were beating him were the same ones who were cheering for him to hurt me just a few minutes before. I stepped toward them with the intention of stopping them, but before I could do anything significant, Lalo grabbed me and led me away from the scene. A gang's loyalty to its members is very tenuous. If a member is not righteous in the eyes of the leaders, he may as well be a rival. This is probably the reason why so many gangs exist in so little territory. The falling out between Speedy and me was sudden and unexpected. Jenny could have been the cause of it, but I think that it had more to do with the lack of respect and true friendship. The incident increased my popularity and fame as a fighter. Lalo dropped me off 2 blocks away at the emergency room of St. Elizabeth Hospital and told me he would get Morena to pick me up later. Amor, brother, Lalo said as he drove away. It took 15 stitches to close the cut over my eye, 3 inside and 12 outside. While I was in the hospital, I just couldn't stop thinking about how Speedy was beaten by his own so-called friends. I rationalized that Speedy must have done other things that made the unknowns react the way they did. I didn't understand that gang members could turn on one of their own within seconds. After I got stitched up, I met Morena in the hospital lobby. She drove me to Maria's and then went to pick up the prescription for pain pills that the doctor had given me. When Morena came back, I had already cleaned up and changed my clothes. Morena asked me to take a ride with her. The Latin Kings wanted to have a word with me. We drove to Maplewood Park, where Lalo and several other kings were waiting for me to arrive. The kings told me that they were impressed by the bravery I had shown in the incident with Speedy and the incident with the Gaylords. As they talked, I became lost in my own lonely thoughts. The fact was that my so-called bravery with Speedy was fear more than anything else, and it had not been for the booze and marijuana in my head, the Gaylord incident would have never taken place. The kings explained that I would have to become a member of their gang. If I didn't, they would have to deal with the fact that Lalo lied to the unknowns about my membership. Lalo took me for a walk and explained in detail what would happen to him if I didn't comply with the wishes of the other kings. He told me that the kings would give him a head-to-toe violation, which meant that 3 other members would be chosen to beat him from head to toe for 3 minutes. Lalo also told me what I would have to go through to become a member of the Kings. He said that usually an incoming member would have to prove himself to be considered becoming a member. Since I had joined the Kings in their retaliation against the gang lords, I wouldn't have to go through the proving phase. Lalo told me that I would have to take an initiation violation that consisted of 2 chosen kings beating me for 3 minutes. Unlike the head-to-toe violation, they would not be allowed to hit me in the face, groin, or basically anywhere where I could seriously be hurt. This was supposed to prove my toughness. After listening to Lalo, I decided to become a member of the Latin Kings from Kedzie and Armitage, not because I wanted to, but because I was too scared to say no. We walked back to Maplewood Park and announced the news to the others. They all seemed happy to hear the news. Morena was especially happy. She said that we would have to go celebrate. Morena, Lalo, and I left Maplewood Park and went to Kedzie and Armitage. When we got there, Lalo told the Kings about my decision. Lalo was not their leader of that section, but he was a high-ranking officer. After a brief conversation with the leader, a date was set for me to be formally initiated. The leader of the Kings from Kedzie and Armitage was a guy called Local. The nickname alone described his personality. He was not big or strong, but he was a homicidal maniac. I sat on the hood of a car with several other kings as I watched Lalo and Local discuss my future. Local kept glancing my way and looking me up and down while he talked to Lalo. After a couple of minutes, Morena was called over too. She came back and told me that an initiation date was set.